throwaway account. I don't want this tied to my main, and some people involved definitely lurk here. Coming back turned out to be harder than leaving, and that's not something anyone prepared me for. Leaving was clear. You pack, you sign, you deploy. There's a structure, orders, a direction. Even fear makes sense there. It has a shape. You know where it comes from and what to do with it. Coming back, though, no one tells you what to do when the danger disappears, but your body refuses to believe it. The road home was long, but distance doesn't scare me anymore. After deployment, kilometers feel meaningless. Time, too. I watch cities slide past the window like decorations. Clean streets, cafes, people walking dogs, couples arguing about nothing. It felt like watching a show I was no longer part of. People smiled, loudly, casually. They laughed in ways that felt excessive, almost obscene. Someone behind me complained about discounts not being as good as last week. Another person was scrolling through videos with the sound on. Every laugh, every sudden burst of noise hit me like a slap. I wanted to grab them by the shoulders and ask, "How are you not listening?" Not listening for engines, for impact, for the split second where everything changes. There's a constant hum that stays with you after service. Not a sound, more like pressure under the skin. Like your body is holding its breath forever. You don't relax into chairs. You sit ready. You don't daydream. You scan. You don't drift. You wait. At one point, a door slammed somewhere nearby. My body reacted before my mind even registered the sound. I dropped low, muscles locked, heart pounding so hard it hurt. Someone laughed nervously. Someone else muttered, "Jesus, calm down." I wanted to explain that I was calm. This is what calm looks like now. There was no enemy here, no threat, no reason for my pulse to spike or my hands to shake. I knew that logically, but logic doesn't mean much when your nervous system has been trained for survival and nothing else. I kept my hands folded tightly in my lap so no one would notice the tremor. I focused on breathing, slow, counted, deliberate. In through the nose, out through the mouth. The way they taught us to stay functional when everything else is chaos. This was supposed to be home, but I felt like I was trespassing in someone else's life. Like I'd missed an update while I was gone, and now nothing synced properly anymore. The world had moved on. I hadn't. People talk a lot about coming back stronger. They love that phrase. It sounds neat, inspirational. What they don't say is that strength doesn't make you softer. It makes you heavier. It makes you quieter. It makes you less willing to pretend. As the bus rolled forward, I realized something that scared me more than any checkpoint ever did. I didn't know how to belong here anymore. And that was only the beginning. Civilian clothes feel heavier than armor. That was the first thing I noticed when I changed. No plates, no weight on my shoulders, no familiar pressure reminding me who I was supposed to be. Just jeans, a jacket, sneakers, and a bag that looked like everyone else's bag. Ordinary, harmless, invisible. Or at least, that's what it was supposed to be. The uniform stayed behind with the last deployment, along with sand that never really washes out, smoke that settles somewhere deep in your lungs, and faces that don't leave you even when you close your eyes. I folded it carefully before leaving, the way you fold something you might never touch again, but can't bring yourself to throw away. I told myself I was glad to be in civilian clothes, that this was freedom, that this meant rest. My body didn't agree. Without the uniform, I felt exposed, like I'd been stripped of context. No rank, no insignia, no visible reason for the way I moved, the way I watched exits, the way my shoulders tensed every time someone walked too close behind me. I could feel people looking at me, even when they weren't. That's the thing. You stop trusting silence. You stop trusting normalcy. You start assuming that if something looks calm, it's because you haven't spotted the threat yet. The bus itself was strange. Old, long distance, one of those that carries people thousands of kilometers in slow stages. The kind with cracked leather seats, a faint smell of diesel, and a TV mounted above the windshield like an afterthought from another decade. Who even puts TVs in buses anymore? Apparently this one did. I chose a seat by the window. Always the window. Fewer surprises from one side. I placed my bag between my feet without thinking, habit, and sat straight, alert, like the ride itself might suddenly demand something from me. Outside, cities passed that didn't recognize me. Streets I didn't know. Shops with bright signs. People carrying groceries, holding hands, arguing into phones. Normal life. Untouched life. I counted my breathing again. 1, 2, 3. Someone dropped something metal a few rows back. It clattered loudly. My heart jumped into my throat before I could stop it. I didn't move this time, but my jaw clenched hard enough to hurt. I caught my reflection in the window. Just a woman. No scars visible, no uniform, no proof. And that scared me more than I expected. Because without the uniform, people don't know what they're looking at. They assume weakness. They assume softness. They assume they can say whatever they want. I'd seen it before, even before service. The way tone changes when people think you're ordinary. The way respect disappears when it's not enforced by symbols. I rested my forehead lightly against the glass and closed my eyes for a second. Bad idea. Images surfaced immediately. Fragments, flashes, unfinished scenes. I opened them again quickly and focused on the road instead. The bus drove on, kilometer after kilometer. Thousands of them, technically. Enough distance to cross from one version of myself to another. I wondered which one would be waiting at the end. The soldier who knew exactly who she was. Or the civilian everyone thought they could humiliate. I had a feeling I was about to find out. About 6 hours into the trip, the TV flickered on. No warning, no announcement. Just a burst of sound cutting through the low hum of the engine. My shoulders tightened instantly. Screens mean information. Information means consequences. My body leaned forward before I could stop it. News. I hated that word more than explosions. The volume was too loud, the colors too sharp. A polished anchor with a calm face spoke about things that had never been calm for me. Borders, operations, casualties, stabilization, clean words, safe words, the kind that make everything sound distant and manageable. Then the images changed. Gaza. My stomach dropped. I knew those streets. Not the exact ones, maybe, but close enough. Same dust color, same broken walls, same sky that looks deceptively peaceful when nothing is falling out of it. My hands clenched around my knees without permission. My breathing went shallow. The bus kept moving. People barely reacted. A woman yawned. Someone else scrolled their phone. To them, it was just background noise, another conflict, another segment between ads. The man sitting next to me snorted. Not loudly, just enough. "What are they even doing there?" he said, eyes still on the screen. "We should worry about our own country, flying who knows where, for who knows what." He said it casually, like he was commenting on bad weather, like the words didn't carry weight, like they weren't sharp. I felt that familiar pressure rise in my chest. The one they train you to control. The one that, if you let it loose, doesn't care about context or consequences. I stared straight ahead for a few seconds, counting. 1, 2, 3. Don't react fast. Fast reactions get you in trouble outside the zone. But he kept going. And then they come back broken and expect everyone to care. He added, "If you ask me, it's their choice. No one forced them." That's when something snapped. Not loudly, not dramatically. Just a clean internal click. I turned to him slowly. Very slowly. I made sure my face stayed neutral. Calm scares people more than anger anyway. "We're protecting civilians there," I said. My voice surprised even me. Steady, low, controlled. Innocent people, children. While others sit comfortably on buses and think opinions formed from a TV screen are worth anything. The man finally looked at me. Really looked. His mouth opened slightly, then closed. He took in my posture. The way I sat. The way my eyes didn't move away from his. The lack of hesitation. I didn't mean... He started, then stopped. His tone changed. Softer. Smaller. I didn't know you were... involved. Involved. I almost smiled at that. Most people don't, I said. The TV kept playing. Images rolled on. Numbers appeared on the screen like statistics instead of lives. I turned back toward the window, signaling the conversation was over. There was a long silence between us. After a while, he cleared his throat. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "Really, I shouldn't have said that." I nodded once without looking at him. Apologies matter more when they're not demanded. The bus drove on. The news segment ended. An ad came on for something ridiculous and cheerful. Life resumed its shallow rhythm. But inside me, something had shifted. That was the moment I realized it wouldn't stop at comments, or looks, or ignorance wrapped in confidence. People would say things. People would test boundaries. People would assume. And every single one of them would be very surprised when they learned exactly who they were talking to. When I finally arrived, it was already dark. The bus hissed, the doors opened, people poured out with bags and impatience, stretching stiff legs, calling relatives, lighting cigarettes. I stood still for a second longer than necessary, letting the crowd move around me like water around a rock. Disembarking is a vulnerable moment. You're visible. You're exposed. Old habit. The street smelled familiar in the wrong way. Not comforting, just recognizable. Like a song you hate, but know all the words to. The houses looked smaller than I remembered. Lower. Tired. As if they'd aged faster than I had. I walked the last few blocks on foot. I needed the movement. The weight of the bag on my shoulder grounded me. Step, step, step. Count the cracks in the pavement. Scan reflections in windows. No one following. Fine. The house came into view and something inside me tightened. It looked off. Same walls, same gate, same stupid, uneven fence plank we never fixed. But the feeling was wrong. Like arriving at a place that remembers you differently than you remember it. The lights were on. Good. At least someone was home. I rang the bell. Nothing. I rang it again. Louder. Footsteps. Whispering. The door finally opened just enough for my mother's face to appear. Her eyes widened, not in joy, in surprise. The bad kind. The kind you get when something you hoped wouldn't happen just did. "You came back?" she said. Not, "I'm glad you're home." Not, "Are you okay?" Just that. "Yes," I replied. "I told you I had leave." She hesitated, then opened the door wider. My father stood behind her, arms crossed. He looked older, thinner, more rigid, like he'd been rehearsing this moment and still wasn't happy with the script. "Why?" he asked. "You signed a contract." 2 years. I set my bag down carefully before answering. "Control your movements. Don't escalate." "I was granted a week," I said. "After a difficult operation." The word operation hung in the air. Neither of them reacted. No questions, no concern, no curiosity. That was my second sign. Inside, the house was quiet. Not peaceful, restrained, like everyone was holding their breath. The furniture was the same, but something felt rearranged in ways I couldn't immediately place. A chair missing, a shelf emptier. The walls looked bare. "You can stay in your old room," my mother said quickly, like she was trying to be generous. "For now. For now." I nodded and walked toward the backyard instead. I needed air, space, something that wasn't layered with tension. That's when I saw it. A bright sign nailed to the fence. "House for sale." My vision narrowed. Tunnel vision. Sharp edges. The world pulled inward until there was only that rectangle of paper screaming something impossible. "What is this?" I asked, my voice flat. They came outside behind me, slow, careful, like approaching something that might bite. "We decided to move," my father said. "It's time." "You didn't tell me," I said, "and you didn't ask." My mother sighed, irritated. "You're barely here. You're gone all the time. This isn't really your life anymore. That one landed." "It's my house too," I said. "Legally." Silence. They exchanged a look people exchange when they think they've already won. "You'll figure something out," my mother added. "You always do. You're strong now, right?" Strong. I stared at the sign, then at them. The battlefield had prepared me for many things. This wasn't one of them, and somehow, that made it worse. That night, I didn't sleep. Not because of nightmares, surprisingly, not those. It was quieter than that. Colder. The kind of silence that presses on your ears until you start inventing sounds just to break it. I lay in my old room staring at the ceiling, tracing cracks I remembered from childhood. One of them looked like a lightning bolt. I used to imagine it was a map to somewhere better. Now it just looked like damage no one ever bothered to fix. The bed was too soft. Soft beds feel unsafe. You sink into them, lose awareness of your body. I stayed on top of the blanket, boots neatly placed by the door without thinking about it. My bag stayed packed. Always packed. You don't unpack when you don't trust the ground you're standing on. Around 2 a.m., I heard voices. Low. Careful. The kind people use when they don't want to be overheard, which is ironic, because it always makes you listen harder. "She won't stay long anyway," my mother whispered. "She can't stop us," my father replied. "She's never here. Courts won't take her seriously." That one stung more than I expected. Not because it was cruel, I've heard worse, but because it was strategic, calculated. They weren't emotional. They were already planning, already framing me as temporary, as absent, as inconvenient, like a guest who overstayed her welcome. I didn't confront them. Not then. I learned a long time ago that reacting in the moment gives people power. Instead, I lay there and felt something shift inside me. A familiar, internal rearrangement. The same one that happens before missions, before decisions that don't come with a return ticket. In the morning, I woke early. Too early. Dawn light crept through the curtains like it was unsure whether it was allowed in. I dressed quietly and went to the kitchen. My mother was already there, drinking coffee. "You're up early," she said, surprised. "Habit," I replied. She watched me closely as I poured water, as if studying my movements for signs of something dangerous. Maybe she was right to be cautious. "About the house," she started. "I saw the documents in the drawer," I interrupted calmly. "You've already contacted an agent." Her eyes widened just slightly. "You shouldn't go through our things." "You shouldn't make decisions behind my back," I said, just as calmly. She straightened, irritation replacing caution. "You left," she snapped. "You chose that life. You don't get to come back and control everything." There it was. The narrative. I leaned against the counter and met her gaze. "I didn't leave the family," I said. "I served." "There's a difference." She scoffed. "Serving doesn't make you special. Plenty of people manage to live normal lives without running off to war." Running off. I nodded slowly. "And plenty of people manage not to sell shared property without consent," I replied. Yet here we are. She went quiet, not because she was convinced, because she was recalculating. That was when I realized this wasn't just emotional. It was legal, financial, intentional. They weren't hurting me by accident. They were trying to push me out cleanly, quietly, without resistance. They thought I'd be too tired to fight, too broken, too grateful to be home. They were wrong. Later that day, I went for a walk. Not to clear my head was already clear. I walked to feel my legs move, to remind myself that I still had agency, that I wasn't trapped. I made a list in my mind: documents to find, conversations to record, boundaries to enforce. I didn't feel rage, not anymore. Rage is messy. What I felt instead was focus. And that's usually the moment things become very uncomfortable for everyone else. By the sixth day, they realized something was wrong. Not with me, with their plan. They expected tears, accusations, emotional outbursts, maybe a dramatic scene where I would yell, pack my things, and leave, making everything easier for them. People who try to humiliate you always hope you'll help them by becoming predictable. I didn't. Instead, I became quiet in a way that made them nervous. I cooked my own meals, cleaned up after myself, left the house early and came back late. I stopped explaining where I was going or what I was doing. I spoke politely, briefly, and only when necessary. No fights, no visible resistance. That kind of calm terrifies people who rely on pressure. My father started testing boundaries first. "You still haven't said how long you're staying," he said one evening, pretending to read something on his phone. "I'm not sure yet," I replied, without looking up. "You should think about your future," he continued. "You can't live here forever." I nodded. "Agreed." He frowned. That wasn't the reaction he wanted. "This place isn't suited for someone like you anymore," he added. "You've changed." There it was. The word people use when they want to turn your growth into a flaw. I looked at him calmly. "Yes," I said. "I have. No defense, no justification, just truth." My mother tried a different approach. "You're so tense all the time," she said over breakfast. "It's uncomfortable. Maybe you should talk to someone. Or take medication. Concern, weaponized." "I already do," I replied. "Both." She blinked, caught off guard. "Oh." She didn't ask more. She didn't want details. She wanted leverage. They started dropping comments in front of relatives on video calls. "She barely sleeps. She startles at noises. War really messes people up." I watched them say these things about me like I wasn't sitting 2 meters away, like I was an object they were explaining away, a problem that needed managing. Once, my aunt asked, half joking, "So? Are you dangerous now?" Everyone laughed. I didn't. I leaned forward slightly and said very calmly, "Only to people who mistake restraint for weakness." The laughter died instantly. That was the first visible crack. After that, things escalated quickly. One afternoon, I came home to find strangers in the living room. A man in a suit, a woman with a clipboard, the real estate agent. "We're just taking some photos," my mother said quickly. "You weren't answering your phone." I looked at the agent. "This property is jointly owned," I said evenly. "You've been misinformed." The man froze. "Excuse me?" "Any attempt to sell without my written consent is illegal," I continued. "I suggest you leave before this becomes a documented issue." Silence. The agent turned slowly toward my parents. "Is that true?" My father's jaw tightened. "She's exaggerating." I pulled out my phone and opened a folder. Deeds, contracts, copies, dates highlighted, notes organized. "I'm not," I said, "and I recommend you consult your legal department." The agent didn't argue. Professionals recognize danger faster than family does. After they left, the house exploded. "You embarrassed us," my mother shouted. "You're sabotaging everything," my father added. I stood there, calm as ever. "You invited strangers into my home without permission," I said. I simply corrected the situation. "You think you're so smart now?" my father snapped. "The army filled your head with nonsense." I stepped closer. Not aggressively, deliberately. "No," I said quietly. "It taught me documentation, discipline, and how to stay calm when people try to intimidate me." His face went pale. That was the moment they understood something fundamental had changed. I wasn't a child who could be pressured. I wasn't a guest they could evict emotionally. I wasn't broken enough to manipulate. And for the first time since I came back, I saw fear in their eyes. Not loud fear, not dramatic fear. The quiet kind. The kind that shows up when people realize humiliation didn't work, and the person they underestimated is already several steps ahead. They sued me 3 days later, not dramatically, not with a screaming match or a slammed door, just a thin envelope placed on the kitchen table like a passive-aggressive note. No explanation, no warning, just paperwork. Cold, precise, deliberate. I recognized the move immediately. That's what people do when they realize they can't control you emotionally anymore. They outsource the pressure. I picked up the envelope and read it standing there, boots still on, bag still over my shoulder. My mother hovered near the sink, pretending to wash the same cup for the third time. My father sat rigidly at the table, staring at a spot just past my face. They weren't looking for reconciliation. They were looking for submission. The claim was simple and cruel in its confidence. I was absent. I was unstable. I had effectively abandoned the property. They framed my service like a prolonged vacation mixed with irresponsibility, as if leaving to serve somehow erased my rights, as if distance equaled forfeiture. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't react at all. I folded the papers neatly and placed them back into the envelope. "You could have talked to me," I said. My father scoffed. "Talking doesn't work with you anymore." There it was again. The complaint disguised as an accusation. "This is just paperwork," my mother added quickly. "Don't make it bigger than it is." I looked at her and almost laughed. Paperwork is never just paperwork. Paperwork is how wars are justified, how borders are moved, how people lose homes without a single shot being fired. I went to my room, closed the door, and sat on the edge of the bed. For exactly 1 minute, I let myself feel it. The shock, the anger, the deep, quiet ache of realizing that the people who were supposed to protect you were now officially your opponents. Then the minute passed, and the uniform went back on, not physically, but internally. The switch flipped, the one that says, "Feel later, act now." I called a lawyer, not the first number I found, not a friend of a friend. I called someone who specialized in property disputes and military cases, someone who didn't flinch when I explained my situation, someone who asked for documents instead of opinions. "Do you have proof of ownership?" she asked. "Yes." "Proof of contribution?" "Yes." "Proof of service and absence being mandatory?" "Extensive." She paused. Then they made a mistake. That was the first time since coming back that I felt genuinely relieved. I spent the next 48 hours the way I'd spent nights before operations. No sleep, high focus, controlled movement. I gathered everything: deeds, payment records, tax documents, correspondence, messages, dates, times. I documented every attempt they'd made to push me out. Every comment, every witness, every inconsistency in their story. They thought I'd be too tired, too traumatized, too grateful to fight. What they didn't understand is that exhaustion doesn't weaken you after service. It sharpens you. You learn how to function without comfort, without reassurance, without approval. When the court date arrived, they were confident. I could see it in the way my father adjusted his jacket, in the way my mother avoided my eyes like she'd already won and didn't want to gloat too early. Their lawyer barely acknowledged me. "This should be straightforward," he said dismissively, flipping through papers. Given her prolonged absence, I smiled politely. The courtroom was smaller than I expected. Quiet, neutral, a place designed to strip emotion out of conflict. Perfect. When I entered, something unexpected happened. People stood. Not everyone, not dramatically, but enough that the shift was noticeable. The judge nodded slightly. The clerk straightened. A few people in the gallery whispered. My parents noticed. Confusion flickered across their faces. They didn't know yet. They didn't know that my service wasn't a vague concept. They didn't know my name had weight. They didn't know this wasn't my first time being evaluated under pressure. As I took my seat, my mother finally looked at me. For the first time since I came back, she looked uncertain. And that's when I understood something important. They thought this was about a house. It wasn't. It was about control. And control was the one thing they no longer had. Courtrooms have their own kind of silence. Not the peaceful kind, not the tense before impact kind either. It's a controlled silence, curated, enforced. A place where every sound means something and nothing is accidental. I noticed it immediately. The way footsteps echoed too clearly. The way papers sounded louder than they should. The way people lowered their voices without being asked. It reminded me, uncomfortably, of briefing rooms. When I walked in, I felt eyes on me before I saw faces, not hostile, curious, measuring. I kept my posture neutral, shoulders relaxed, gaze level. You don't slouch in places where people are deciding your future. You don't puff up either. You exist. Solid. Unmovable. My parents sat across the room. Together, but not touching. My mother's hands were clenched in her lap. My father stared straight ahead, jaw tight. Their lawyer leaned back confidently, one arm draped over the chair like he was already bored. He glanced at me, dismissed me, and turned back to his notes. That was his mistake. The judge entered. Everyone stood. Routine, automatic. But when I straightened, when my heels clicked against the floor and I lifted my head, I felt a shift ripple through the room. Not loud, not dramatic, just attention. The clerk read my name, not shouted, not emphasized, just spoken clearly. The reaction was immediate. The judge paused, just for a second. A brief, unmistakable hesitation before she looked up at me properly. Her expression changed, subtle but real. Recognition, context. She nodded once, not warmly, respectfully. Across the room, my father noticed. I saw it from the corner of my eye. His shoulders stiffened. My mother frowned slightly, confused, like she'd missed a line in a script everyone else had read. The opposing lawyer cleared his throat. Your Honor, this is a straightforward case, he began. The plaintiff has been absent from the property for an extended period, during which, due to mandatory service, the judge interjected calmly. He froze. Well, yes, but, which is documented, she continued, and protected under law. He swallowed and nodded, trying to recover momentum. I didn't look at him. I didn't need to. When it was my turn to speak, I stood slowly. No rush. No nerves. My hands didn't shake. That surprised me. I felt grounded, like my feet were exactly where they were supposed to be. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't tell stories. I presented facts, dates, contracts, contributions, legal clauses. I explained my absence not as an excuse, but as a condition of service, a duty. One that didn't erase ownership, rights, or presence. It simply relocated it temporarily. I watched their lawyer's confidence erode sentence by sentence, watched him flip pages faster, watched him stop leaning back. When my parents' turn came, it was painful. My father spoke about stability, about family decisions, about how things change and life moves on. The judge listened politely. Then she asked one question. Did you have written consent to initiate the sale? Silence. My mother looked at my father. My father looked at the table. Their lawyer cleared his throat again. No, Your Honor. That was it. The room didn't explode. No gasps, no shouting. Just the quiet, irreversible sound of something collapsing under its own weight. The ruling was short, clean, unemotional. The house could not be sold. Any attempt to do so without my consent was illegal. The lawsuit was dismissed. When the gavel came down, I didn't feel triumph. I felt relief. As people stood to leave, something happened that I'll never forget. My parents didn't look at me. They lowered their heads. Not in shame, exactly. In recognition. In the sudden, awful understanding that the person they'd tried to diminish was not only stronger, she was untouchable in the ways that mattered. I walked out of the courtroom alone. And for the first time since coming back, I felt like I hadn't lost my place in the world after all. The hallway outside the courtroom smelled like old paper and disinfectant. That sterile, institutional smell that tries to convince you everything here is neutral and fair, even when it never really is. People moved past me in small clusters, talking quietly, already switching back to their everyday lives. To them, this was just another case on a schedule. To me, it felt like walking out of a bunker after a long lockdown. My parents followed a few steps behind. I didn't turn around. I didn't need to. I could feel them there. The weight of unfinished words, of things they suddenly wanted to say and didn't know how. For once, they were the ones unsure of their footing. "Wait," my mother said finally. I stopped, but I didn't face her right away. I looked at the exit sign glowing above the door. Green, bright, directional, simple. I liked that. "This didn't have to go this far," she said. Her voice was tight, defensive, trying to sound reasonable after the fact. "You escalated it." I turned slowly. "You filed a lawsuit against your own daughter," I replied. That was the escalation. My father stepped in, irritation slipping through the cracks of his composure. "You humiliated us in there." I blinked once. "No," I said evenly. "I answered questions." Silence again. The kind that follows when people realize the script they prepared doesn't work anymore. "You think you've won something?" he muttered. "But this changes things." I looked at him carefully. Really looked. At the man who used to raise his voice to control rooms. At the man who assumed authority meant permanence. "Yes," I said. "It does." They waited for more. For anger. For threats. For a breakdown. That's what they were used to extracting from me before service. Reactions they could use, twist, and dismiss. They didn't get one. I walked past them and pushed the door open. Outside, the city noise hit me like a wave. Cars, voices, sirens somewhere far off. For a split second, my muscles tensed out of habit. Then they relaxed. That was new. I stood on the steps for a moment, letting the sound wash over me instead of fighting it. I felt oddly empty. Not hollow, just finished. Like a task had been completed cleanly, without loose ends. My phone buzzed. A message from my lawyer. Textbook case. They won't try again. I believed her. On the way home, I took a different route. Not because I needed to, but because I could. That freedom mattered more than I expected. The house looked the same when I arrived. Same fence, same gate, same uneven plank. But the air around it felt different. Lighter. Claimed. Inside, my parents avoided me completely. No comments. No passive-aggressive remarks. No, "we need to talk." They had finally understood something. I wasn't here to negotiate my existence. That night, I slept in my old room again. Same ceiling, same crack shaped like lightning. But this time, I unpacked my bag. All the way. Folded clothes, lined up toiletries, small, deliberate actions that said I'm not leaving under pressure. Lying there in the dark, I thought about the courtroom, about the moment the judge looked at me with recognition, about how my parents' faces changed when they realized the world saw me differently than they did. Humiliation only works when the person accepts the role you assign them. I didn't. And once you stop accepting it, something irreversible happens. People don't know how to hurt you anymore. Silence after a fight is never empty. It's thick, pressurized. It carries everything that wasn't said and everything that will never be said again. The house was full of it after the verdict, like the walls themselves were holding their breath. No one slammed doors. No one cried. No one apologized. My parents moved around me carefully, like people sharing space with something unpredictable. My mother cleaned obsessively, wiping already clean surfaces, rearranging objects that didn't need rearranging. My father stayed out longer than usual, coming home late and leaving early, as if distance could undo what had happened. They didn't ask how I was. They didn't congratulate me. They didn't argue. They avoided. That told me more than any words ever could. I noticed changes in myself too. Subtle ones. Important ones. I stopped flinching at every sound in the house. Not because my body suddenly forgot the war, it didn't, but because the tension here had changed shape. Before, I was waiting to be attacked emotionally. Now, there was nothing coming. The threat was gone. One afternoon, a car backfired on the street. Loud, sharp, sudden. I froze for half a second. Then, nothing. No drop to the ground. No rush of adrenaline. No hands shaking afterward. I stood there, breathing normally, surprised at myself. That's when it hit me. Safety isn't always about the absence of danger. Sometimes it's about the absence of people who want to break you. I started reclaiming space, slowly, intentionally. I fixed the broken fence plank. I replaced a light bulb that had been flickering for years. I cleared out the shed, threw away rusted tools no one used anymore. Each small task grounded me, proof of presence, proof of ownership, proof that I wasn't temporary. Neighbors started noticing. "You're back for good," one asked. "For now," I answered. That was honest. One evening, my mother finally tried. "We didn't expect you to become like this," she said quietly, standing in the doorway of the kitchen. "Like this." I looked at her. Really looked. She wasn't angry. She wasn't defensive. She looked tired, smaller, older. "Neither did I replied. She nodded slowly, like she'd hoped for something softer and didn't know what to do with what she got instead. "You scare people now?" she added. I considered that. "No," I said. "I disappoint their expectations." She didn't argue. That night, I sat outside on the steps and listened to the city. The normal noise, engines, laughter, music from a distant apartment. It still felt strange, but not hostile, not fake, just different. I realized something important then. I wasn't angry anymore. Anger had carried me through the fight, but it didn't come with me afterward. It stayed behind in the courtroom, where it had done its job. What replaced it wasn't bitterness or coldness, it was clarity. I didn't need revenge. I didn't need apologies. I didn't need validation from the people who tried to erase me. I needed boundaries. I needed autonomy. I needed a place that was mine, not just legally, but emotionally. The silence in the house stopped feeling heavy. It started feeling final. And that's when I knew the real confrontation was over. I'm writing this a few weeks later, not because it took me that long to understand what happened, but because I needed time to see what stayed after everything settled. After the court. After the silence. After the adrenaline finally burned off. Here's the truth no one tells you when you come back from service. The hardest part isn't what you lose, it's what you can't unlearn. I can't unlearn how quickly people try to reduce you when they think you're vulnerable. I can't unlearn how confidently they speak about things they've never lived through. And I definitely can't unlearn how fast family can turn into opposition when money, control, or comfort are involved. But I also can't unlearn the good things. I can't unlearn how to stay calm when someone is trying to provoke me. I can't unlearn how to separate facts from emotions. I can't unlearn how to stand in a room where people expect you to fold and not fold. That stayed. The humiliation attempts stopped after the verdict. Completely. No comments, no side remarks, no jokes dressed up as concern. It's amazing how quiet people become once they realize you're not the version of yourself they remember controlling. My parents and I exist in the same space now, but we don't perform family anymore. No pretending. No forced warmth. Just distance with clear borders. And honestly, that's healthier than what we had before. I'm preparing to leave again soon. Not because I'm being pushed out, but because I choose to. There's a difference. I'll rent my own place, somewhere neutral, somewhere without history clinging to the walls. And I'm okay with that. If anyone reading this is in a similar situation, coming back from service, from trauma, from anything that fundamentally changed you, here's what I wish someone had told me. You don't owe softness to people who weaponize your pain. You don't owe explanations to people committed to misunderstanding you. And you definitely don't owe silence to those who try to humiliate you into compliance. Strength doesn't always look loud. Sometimes it looks like paperwork. Sometimes it looks like restraint. Sometimes it looks like staying calm while someone else realizes they've lost. I didn't come back broken. I came back incompatible with manipulation. And if that makes some people uncomfortable, good. That's how you know you're finally standing in your own place again.